It's a vast pottery army which is slowly being unearthed from the tomb where it's lain for more than 2,000 years.
Farmers found the first clay statues in 1974. But the real mystery is only coming out now thanks to advanced lasers. Basically, the clay army is just the front gate to a city of the dead that covers thousands and thousands of acres. The scans show shapes that look like many people were put in the ground at once in a very violent way.
It becomes clear to the research team that these statues were carved and then buried as an army to protect the emperor in his afterlife.
This was not a peaceful place for a king to rest, but a place built on fear and pain. For starters, the real shocker is what lies deep under the feet of the stone men. Clay soldiers, hiding dark secrets. The Terracotta Army consists of 8,000 warriors buried over 2,000 years ago, and is known as one of the greatest wonders of the world. While these statues are famous, recent scans have exposed a layer of history that is truly frightening. It is not as simple as a king wanting protection in the afterlife. The deeper the technology scans, the more it seems the emperor built his kingdom on top of a nightmare. One can see little chains tied together that look like chainmail. Nobody really knows what they are for, but some think it is the armor soldiers would wear to follow the king into the next life. However, there are things down there that do not belong in a tomb. Scans show secret rooms, strange marks in the dirt, and a history of betrayal that was buried alive. The real deal is that the army is not there to protect the emperor. It is there to keep the truth from ever getting out. This area is a forbidden realm. The massive size of the place suggests that the clay army is just the front gate to a city of the dead that covers thousands and thousands of acres. Everyone is obsessed with the warriors, but the real mystery is the miles of empty space between them. Some researchers think the emperor did not just want to be buried. He wanted to create a backup version of China. If his empire above the ground fell, his spirit would still have a perfect copy underneath. This is why there are clay stables with real bronze tools and even birds and animals made of clay. There is a theory that is even wilder. Some people believe the emperor was obsessed with living forever. He spent his whole life looking for a magic drink that would make him immortal. When he could not find it, he built this tomb as a machine to bring his soul back to life. Every statue, every river of mercury, and every star painted on the ceiling was part of a giant map to help him find his way back to the world of the living. It sounds crazy, but when you see the level of detail, you start to wonder. The soldiers are not just standing there, they are facing east. This is because that is where the enemies he defeated lived. He was making sure that even in death, he was ready for a war. The real shocker came when high-tech cameras looked past the clay faces and into the dark voids. Albert Lin did not arrive at the site like a normal traveler. He knew that this place had a very long and heavy history. He is not the kind of person who just digs in the dirt with a shovel. He is more like a high-tech detective. He uses tools that were made for things like searching for objects in war zones. His work is respected all over the globe, but even for him, getting into the closed parts of the site was almost impossible. For 30 years, the government kept the hidden parts under tight control. Drones were not allowed to fly there, and every scan needed a special green light from the top. Even the local experts often worked without knowing the full picture. Somehow Lin got the okay to go where no other person from another country had ever gone. From the moment he stepped onto the dirt, the stress in the air was clear. Officers in uniforms watched his every move. They looked at his computers and his drones very closely. Every time he wanted to fly a drone, he had to ask. Every time he wanted to run a scan, someone was watching his shoulder. As his team put their tools together, the air inside the pits felt very thick. Being in the center of the site felt like being in a place that was not meant for the living. Very few people have ever walked in these specific spots. Even fewer were allowed to look at them with scanners. He moved through rooms that had been closed for thousands of years. It felt like history was still breathing all around him. The clay soldiers stood tall in every direction. Some looked like they were waiting for a fight, and others looked totally calm. It was hands down one of the most amazing things ever seen. Every pit showed him something new. He saw carriages with wheels that still looked good after all this time. There were stables with clay horses that looked like they were waiting for someone to feed them. The bronze swords and spears were still sharp. Each room felt like a moment frozen in time. But the team was not there just to look at the art. They were there to find what the human eye could not see. Drones went up carrying the best scanning tools on the market. On the ground, the team moved radar systems along the floor to see what was miles under their feet. As he looked at the quiet rows of soldiers, a bad feeling started to grow. The beauty of the statues seemed to be hiding something much worse. It felt like something was waiting to be found. This was something the Emperor never wanted anyone to see. The crazy part is that while the world sees the clay army as a wonder, local legends say the site is cursed. They say that anyone who disturbs the Emperor's peace will meet a terrible end. Even the farmers who first found the statues in 1974 said their lives were never the same. Some lost their land, some got sick, and others felt like they had opened a door that should have stayed shut. The team had to push past these stories to focus on the science. But even a person of science can feel the weight of 2,000 years of secrets. The scanners used were called ground-penetrating radar. This technology sends pulses into the dirt that bounce back when they hit something solid. It creates a map of the shadows. And when those maps started to appear on the screen, the team stopped breathing. They saw walls that were not on any map. They saw deep vertical shafts that went down over 100 feet. And they saw shapes that looked like thousands of small, unidentifiable objects clustered together. One theory suggests these are not just more soldiers, but actual items the Emperor used in his daily life, all made of stone so they would never rot. Another theory, much more frightening, is that the scanners were picking up the remains of the Emperor's actual court. These would be people who were not made of clay but were placed there in person. It is not that simple though, because the deeper the lasers went, the more the ground looked like a giant messy graveyard. The beauty of the stone army masks a much darker reality waiting below the surface. Ancient tunnels hiding lost truths. For a very long time, no one was allowed to fly anything over the area because it was considered too secret. But Albert Lin had that rare permission and his special cameras. He became the first person to ever send a drone over the top of the Emperor's final home. From the sky, the site showed a lot more than just rows of clay men. The real size of the underground world started to show up on the screens. Patterns and lines appeared that no one can see from the ground. A tool called Lidar was used. This tool uses lasers to see through trees, grass, and even the top of the dirt. Under the pits that are already known, there was a huge web of strange things. Empty spaces, walls that were buried, and rooms that had fallen in were found. Shapes also appeared that looked like big areas where many people were put in the ground at once. Some spots even showed that there had been a lot of heat there a long time ago. Then the most upsetting part of all was found. Deep under the feet of the soldiers, the scans showed a bunch of messy holes. These holes were too messy to be buildings, but they were too neat to be natural. They looked exactly like what experts call mass graves. The dirt in those spots looked damaged and scarred. It looked like something very violent had happened there. There were cracks in the earth and signs that a lot of force was used. There were even shapes that looked like bones scattered all over. The data was clear, and the team did not say a word. What sits under the clay army is not just a palace for a dead king. It is a graveyard, and it is not a graveyard for heroes. It is a graveyard for people who were treated very badly. This was a place where thousands of people met their end. The history books say that 700,000 people worked on this project. That is a massive number of people. If even a small portion of them were kept there, it would be one of the biggest burial sites in human history. Some people believe that the emperor used the construction of the tomb as a way to get rid of his enemies. He would send people he did not like to work on the pits, and then he would make sure they never left. The scanners showed that the earth was disturbed in a way that suggests many people were fighting to get out. There are signs of struggle layers in the soil. This is where the dirt is all mixed up because of movement. It looks like the tunnels were filled in while people were still inside them. Some of the radar signatures show that there might be metal traps still active in those lower levels. Old stories say that mechanical bows were set up to fire at anyone who walked through the dark halls. While most people think the wood would have rotted away, some believe the bronze parts could still work. Imagine a trap that has been waiting to fire for 2,000 years. The Lidar also found a strange pyramid shape deep under the main mound. This pyramid is made of packed earth, and it is hidden so well that you cannot see it from the surface. This suggests the Emperor wanted his most important secrets to be buried under layers and layers of protection. What lay beneath the feet of those stone warriors was not glory, but a terrifying reality of what it cost to build a dream. The truth that came out of the scans was much darker than anyone had ever guessed. Under the perfect rows of clay soldiers, under all the gold and the stone, lay the quiet bodies of the people who built it. As the team looked deeper into the data, they saw that this was not just one small grave. They saw the same pattern over and over again under different groups of soldiers. Dozens of hidden holes were filled with human remains. For hundreds of years, people who study history thought the emperor might have forced his workers to stay in the tomb forever. A famous writer from a long time ago wrote that the people who knew the secrets of the tomb were never allowed to walk out. But the scans showed something even more cruel. Pit after pit showed skeletons with heads that had been broken by force. In some rooms, the radar showed that the ceilings had been made to fall down on purpose. Tools were found lying right next to the bodies of the workers. These people were not given a nice funeral. They were simply silenced. Their bodies were tossed into holes covered with dirt. And then the clay army was built right on top of them. And then there were the tunnels. The scans picked up soft echoes of air pockets that were deeper than any room known about. It is thought these are tunnels that have either fallen in or were never found. Some of them go very deep under the pits. No book or record ever said anything about tunnels going that deep. But the thing that bothered the team the most was the footprints. Using a special kind of imaging, soft marks were seen in one of the underground rooms. These were marks of people running, tripping, or being pulled along the ground. The dirt had kept their last movement saved like a picture. This was not a peaceful place for a king to rest. It was a place built on fear. It was sealed with a terrible crime and guarded by stone men who say nothing. A dark history of forced labor is etched into the very soil of this site. Mass graves under stone feet. Some of the skeletons found in these pits were wearing iron collars. This means they were not just workers. They were prisoners. They were forced to build their own grave. There is a wild theory that the emperor actually believed these people would become his servants in the afterlife too. He did not just want clay statues. He wanted the spirits of real people to serve him. This is why their bodies were placed so close to the clay army. He was mixing the world of the living with the world of the dead. Some experts have found that the clay used to make the warriors was taken from the same area where the bodies were buried. This has led to a very creepy theory that the clay statues might actually contain the DNA or even the ashes of the workers. It would be a way to trap them in the statues forever. While there is no proof of this yet, the fact that the bodies and the clay are so close together makes one wonder. What if the 8,000 soldiers are not just art, but a giant prison for 8,000 souls? The footprints seen were located in a narrow hallway that led toward the main tomb. It looked like a group of people were trying to run away from something coming from the center of the mound. Maybe they were running from the Mercury, or maybe they were running from the soldiers who were sent to seal them in. Every step deeper into the scan revealed that the most expensive tomb on Earth was actually a house of horrors. Right near the middle of the scan, the team saw something that did not look right. Under the neat layout of the rooms and tunnels was one single hole. It was older than the things around it. It was dug much deeper into the earth, as if someone wanted to hide it under everything else. Inside that hole was one skeleton. This person had not been tossed in like the others. The bones were laid out in a careful way. The bones belonged to a young man who was likely in his early 20s. But what made everyone go quiet was what they saw in his head. There was a bronze arrow tip stuck deep inside his skull. This was not an accident from a hunt. This was a clear execution. The big question was not how he died, but who he was. Old records talk about the sons of the first emperor. They were born with a lot of power, but their lives were full of people who did not trust them. A few of those sons disappeared from history books, and no one ever explained why. For hundreds of years, people argued about what happened to them. There was never any proof, only silence. As the experts looked at the room, the details started to make sense in a very scary way. The way he was buried was very neat. The items found around him were very expensive, not the kind of things a normal worker would have. The room itself was way below where the workers were found. It was in a spot that a normal person would never find by accident. This was not just another victim. This might have been one of the emperor's own children. He was not eliminated by an army from another land. He was likely eliminated because his own family gave the order. The hole was not shaped like a normal grave. The space felt more like a tiny jail cell. The way he was placed there made it look like he might have been kept there before he died. He was shut away from the world and erased from everyone's memory while he was still alive. But even though they tried to keep him quiet, his story lasted. The tomb was not just a grave. It was proof of a huge betrayal. There is a theory that the emperor's successor, his second son, wanted to make sure no one could ever challenge his right to rule. To do this, he allegedly did away with all his brothers and sisters. Some historians think there are dozens of these royal pits hidden around the mound, each holding a prince or a princess who was seen as a threat. Scanners picked up several more small, deep voids that match the shape of this prince's grave. It suggests a massive family purge took place right as the emperor was being buried. The crazy part is that these royals were buried with the same workers they used to rule over. In the eyes of the new king, they were all the same, just secrets that needed to be put in the ground. Another wild theory is that the prince was not eliminated by his brother, but was part of a ritual. Some believe the emperor wanted a living guard from his own bloodline to watch over him. The arrow in the skull was a way to make sure the spirit stayed in the tomb. It sounds like a horror movie, but when you look at how much the emperor feared death, you realize he would do anything to feel safe. Family secrets are buried deeper than the foundations of the palace itself. Royal blood found in shadows. The prince's bones showed signs of stress, meaning he might have been held in that small stone room for weeks or months before the end came. The stories written on the old bamboo scrolls suggest that the king's fear of the living was just as big as his fear of the dead. Inside rooms that were sealed shut near the emperor's main spot, experts found something they thought would be gone by now. They found piles of bamboo scrolls. To keep the old paper safe, the experts had to work in a room where the air was just right. What they read was not just a list of things the king did. It felt more like a confession. These scrolls were like other ones found in the area, and they had some of the most chilling stories from the time the emperor ruled. Line by line, they talked about a world that was run by fear instead of just laws. One scroll talked about how the king ordered 460 smart men to be put in the ground while they were still alive. Other scrolls talked about how he ordered books to be burned. He wanted to get rid of any ideas or knowledge that might make people question his power. Some of the writings were even scarier. They were confessions signed by the people who built the tomb and the engineers. The reasons they were in trouble were not clear, but they were terrifying. They were accused of having bad thoughts about the king or not working fast enough. These scrolls showed that every single person working there was being watched all the time. If you made one mistake, it could be the end of you. As the history experts read the words, they realized the truth about the first emperor. For a long time, people liked him because he brought China together. They liked him for building the Great Wall and the Clay Army, but now they saw him for who he really was. He was a man who was very paranoid and needed to have total control over everything. The clay soldiers were not just great pieces of art anymore. They were not symbols of being loyal. They became something much darker. They were an eternal force of control. They were standing guard over a place built on pain and death. Some of the scrolls also describe failed attempts to find the island of the immortals. The emperor sent out ships with thousands of young people to find a magic potion, and they never came back. Some people think those ships were not lost at sea. but were actually sent away because the emperor was afraid they would come back without the potion and tell everyone he was just a regular man who would die. There is also a theory that the scrolls contain a curse or a set of instructions on how to wake up the clay army. The text is very hard to translate, but some parts talk about bringing the clay to life with breath. This has led some people to think the emperor actually believed in magic and thought his army would literally stand up and fight for him one day. It's not that simple, though, because the scrolls also mention a secret room filled with gold and jewels that has never been found. The scans show a huge empty space about 3 stories high right under the main palace floor. If this room exists, it could be the biggest treasure chest in the world. But the scrolls warn that the treasure is bathed in the poison of the stars. This is likely a reference to the mercury. The scholars who were buried alive were often the ones who tried to tell the emperor that he was being too cruel. By burying them, he was not just stopping their voices. He was trying to stop the truth from reaching the future. The written records confirm that the ruler's paranoia knew no bounds, even in death. Toxic rivers guarding dead kings. The most dangerous thing in the tomb isn't a curse or a ghost. It is a very real, very poisonous metal. At the very center of the whole place sits the most forbidden spot in all of China. This is the main tomb of the first emperor. No one has ever opened it. No one has ever stepped inside. No one really knows what is waiting behind those walls. But there are some clues. The levels of mercury in the dirt were not just a little high. They were hundreds of times higher than what you find in nature. The old books said the king ordered rivers of liquid mercury to flow around a tiny model of his palace inside the tomb. He wanted a silver empire that would last forever. For a long time, people thought that was just a story. Now it looks very real. If someone were to open the tomb today, those gases could rush out and hurt everyone nearby. It could turn a search for history into a deadly event. If the room was cracked open, the pressure inside could cause a violent blast. Then there is the problem of keeping things safe. Back in the 1980s, experts opened a smaller pit of soldiers. They watched in horror as the bright paint on the statues started to peel off in just a few seconds. After being sealed for over 2,000 years, the air destroyed the colors that had stayed perfect for so long. If the emperor's main tomb has wooden buildings, silk flags, or paintings, opening it could ruin them in an instant. It could wipe out history the second it is found. Could the clay army actually be a giant prison meant to trap thousands of souls forever? Tell us what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe for more mysteries.